Hello, today is May 4th and my name is Shondell. Today I will be interviewing Julie Mitchell. Well, I'm just going to ask you some simple questions. Just give an answer. You ready to get started?
Yes, I am.
Okie dokie. Well, the first one is, where were you born?
I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Born and raised here.
And where's home now?
Home now is in Cedar Rapids. I've lived several different places all over the United States, but this is my home. I lived in Des Moines, Iowa, and Minneapolis, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But this is where my relatives and things are, and this is my home.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Morningside College in Sioux City, Iowa. That's where I received my BA. Now, as far as when I was young here in Cedar Rapids, I started at Tyler Elementary, which is Metro School now. And in those days, we were going through a lot of changes. There were lots and lots of changes happening, and I was right in the middle of it. What happened was my parents decided that they were going to move, and we moved from what was called Oak Hill, Jackson area, when we lived on 6th Street Southeast, to a place that was all white. It was 30th Street Drive Northeast, which is off First Avenue, quite a ways
Did
away.
you live by the Oak Hill Jackson Cemetery or by the Oak Hill Jackson Church?
Well, we didn't actually live in the Oak Hill Jackson. It was all, this is all considered Oak Hill Jackson. We lived on 6th Street Southeast, which is where the old post office is. In that area, it's on the southeast side of 8th Avenue on 6th Street. So, little house that's no longer there anymore. And really neat little house. But we moved, and my parents moved before I moved because there were a lot of threats against my mother and father for moving into this area. And they felt it was better if I stayed and went to Tyler instead of going to Arthur Elementary, where the school where I was supposed to go. So I lived with my grandmother for a little while, and what happened was because I was in a different district, my parents lived in a completely different district and away from Tyler. The principal at the school, and it was a woman principal, which was very unusual in those days. This was like in 1960, I think. Her name was Miss Smithy. I will never forget that woman. She had a meeting, a huge meeting with all the parents and things of the children that were at Arthur Elementary, which was a pretty upward scale elementary school, and is still that kind of an elementary school, even in those days, in the early 60s. And they decided that, or she told everybody that I was going to come to school there because my parents now lived in the area, and there's no reason for me not to. So I went to Arthur, and I was the first black child, to go to Arthur Elementary ever in the whole history of Cedar Rapids. After I'd been at Arthur for a couple of years, my sister started. She was about 5 years younger than I was, so I was like in 6th grade or 5th grade, and she was like in kindergarten. And then there were 2 of us at Arthur. But it was pretty interesting, very different time.
How has the civil rights movement affected you?
Oh, it has affected me greatly. Like I said, I was one of the first black children to go to an all-white school. There were others very shortly after I started to go in and around Cedar Rapids, but I was one of the first. And there were a lot of things that happened, both good and bad. I got to know a lot of kids. They found out that I was just a fun little girl who liked to play jacks and hopscotch and Barbie. Barbie was the big thing because Barbie had just come out at that time. And so we kind of got together, and they found out that I was no different from any other little girl. And that I started to be a little bit more accepted at that time.
What was segregation segregation like for you during that time?
Well, there was really, like I said, I was in the middle and kind of the beginnings of the end of segregation in Cedar Rapids. After I moved into this new area, there were lots of other black families that had started to move into white areas also. I was continued on through school and went to Washington High School for my sophomore year, and we did something that was completely unheard of. We did A Raisin in the Sun, and I played Mama in the lead part, and it's pretty much an all-black cast, except for one white person toward the end of this show. And was wonderful, beautiful show, and just incredible. People just couldn't believe we were going to do it, and we did it. And I was kind of hooked on theater at the time, and I was active in theater and things at Washington. And I also was very active in orchestra. I played the violin during my time. Started that in high school.
Can you describe the role of African American church back then in the community?
Well, for me, growing up, it was a lot of fun. Going to these schools, I went to Franklin Junior High, and there were only a handful of black children there. When I went, there were about maybe 7, 6 at Franklin, and then of course when we got to Washington, there were many, many, many more. But the church was a good place to go to see all my black friends that I had originally met and started to grow up with at Tyler, but had kind of started to go, I missed greatly because I was going to another school and I really wasn't seeing them. So on Saturdays and Sundays, when Saturdays we'd have choir practice, and I remember specifically the holidays, Christmases, and getting dressed and doing pieces and having Christmas candy, and being in the youth group with all of my friends and things. It was a good place to go. It was a place of learning and growth, and it was just a really good place.